information. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on, beautiful people? We are back for a much anticipated conversation. Conversation where we're discussing how can we have more classroom engagement? How can we understand the students that are in our classrooms? And how can we not only reach them all, but how can we do that at the same time? Now, y'all may be thinking, Daniel, this may be some crazy talk. Really, can we design a lesson? Can we structure our classes in a way to where every single one of our students are engaged? And if we can, how is that possible? That very question is the one that I'm going to be answering tonight. With that being said, I want to introduce myself. I am Dr. Daniel Truelove, and what I do is I work with organizations and schools as it relates to the climate and culture of their organization. And so what that means is that we work on solving the problems that are related to communication, related to how we, collaborate with each other in order for us to make sure that we can get together to the destination that we're trying to go to. And one of the challenges that I often work with is that how can we as educators, how can we do a better job of reaching the students that are in our classrooms? This is whenever I share it, no matter if it's at a conference, if it's me doing this for a school or a district, this is the one to where everybody is like, oh wow, like okay, like we need more of this. So you know what? I'm getting ready to give it to you all. So with that being said, I want to share this with you all. Do not just glean this information for yourselves. Do me a favor. I promise you it's going to be good. So like this, make sure you share it out to your network so that your other educated friends, or just so the individuals that may get an opportunity to engage in this, that they can benefit from it as well. And so with that being said, I want to make sure, can you all hear me well? Is everybody, I want to make sure, give me thumbs up. I want to make sure that everybody is able to hear me before I get started, and I jump right on into the content that I'm going to be sharing. We're good? Looks like we are. And so with that said, I'm going to jump right on in. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to share the context of the framework that we're going to be coming from. One of the things that I utilize in my work is the DISC assessment. So I utilize other assessments, but I'm just going to be focusing on this one for right now. But I utilize the DISC assessment. And so this is something that I administer. I give it to principals so they can give it to their staff. Also, students can take this assessment. I work with school districts, so at the central office level for superintendents, with school boards, we're all taking this assessment that I send to them and share these results with them. And so basically what this is a psychology that talks about how do we behave as it relates to certain things. And a lot of times when we talk about these behaviors, we talk about these behaviors from the perspective of adults. How do adults behave as it relates to how they address problems, how they interact and engage with people, how are they with their preferred pace in their environment, and how do they handle already established procedures. We look at adults and say, okay, when it comes to this, this psychology, this is how adults operate. But the reality is that not only do adults operate in this way, guess who else operates in this way as well? Your students, right? So in the same way that you approach problems in a certain way, your students approach problems in a certain way. In the same way that you interact with people in a certain way, your students do the same thing. And the same thing applies for all these other areas too. So when we think about this, like they may not necessarily be the mature version of that you are today, but that does not mean that they're still not operating within that. And so now we understand that, hey, we have students that have these certain behavioral tendencies. And if we can identify those tendencies that are in our classroom, it can help us understand how we can utilize that information to engage them. And so with that being said, what does this exactly mean? It means that we have individuals that are in our classroom. Now, keep in mind, I'm talking about students specifically. We have individuals that are in our classrooms that we have mislabeled. Okay? I'm going to slow down. I'm going to repeat that and say it again. We have individuals in our classrooms that are walking down our halls that we have mislabeled. Individuals that are, let's say, for example, if you have an individual that is an adult and they're very much so assertive and they're, going after assertive and aggressive, going after their goals, that person is called a leader. What's the difference between a student also possessing those same traits and characteristics? Now, I did say they are a more immature version of that. And so we don't necessarily see them as leaders. One thing we do see them as is disruptive, right? We see them as defiant. Same behavior, if they were an adult, will be seen as leadership. As a student, is seen as disruptive and defiant. And so the way in which we view them, whether it be in a school setting or specifically in a classroom setting, like our language kind of shifts. What about the eyes? We have eyes who are very much so known by the way in which they interact with others. As a student level, they're communicators, right? They're communicators. These are individuals that, we can call them our class clowns, right? They're individuals that are always talking, love the social elements of it. But the reality is that person is a communicator that does not necessarily know how to communicate at the level or when to share certain things. And I'm going to go into that a little bit later. But we have these different elements of them that we can start misclassifying. And when we mislabel these individuals, it doesn't allow us to be able to lean in to how we can utilize this information in order to engage our students. What about the S's? Those individuals are the helpers. And you all know your helpers. I don't care if you are an elementary educator, administrator, or even if you are secondary. These individuals have certain traits and tendencies that you can pick up on very early. That lets them know that they're individuals that like things to be predictable. They are individuals that will run up to you and quick to help you out as it relates to things. And those types of students have certain behavioral tendencies, but not only that, they have certain things that they need in a school setting and also in a classroom setting. And last but not least, we have our investigators. These are our C's, those individuals that approach procedures, well-established procedures, in a very much so meticulous way. And so these individuals, very much so young, they ask a lot of questions. They're not the quickest one to hop on board as it relates. They may be a little bit more shy, a little bit more reserved. And so we have students that are, D's and I's that are very much so outgoing. The way in which we, engage with them in the classroom is completely different than the way that we would engage with somebody that is an S or a C in a classroom. And if we just approach our instructional practices from one lens, meaning that, hey, this is the way I've developed this lesson. This is my lesson plan. This is my approach to it. And I'm going to reach everybody from this one approach. We are sadly mistaken. Very much so sadly mistaken. And so why is it so important? We have to understand that not only do we have behavioral tendencies, but with each one of these behavioral needs, there's something that they're desiring when they have these certain traits. And the reason why this is so important to me is because there is an element that is missing as it relates to K-12 education. Every one of our schools is set up to make sure that we're producing college and career ready students. That's the mission of every single one of our schools. And how can we create college and career ready students without identifying the gifts and the talents of the students that we have? I rewind back. I said a high D as an adult is a leader, but that same high D as a student is defiant. And so now we are labeling something that negative, that if we could cultivate that young person's leadership skills, they could grow into becoming a great leader. But if we're not identifying those things, then we have things that we are continuing to call negative in a K-12 setting that could actually be positives. Why is this important to me? I am someone that got in trouble ever since elementary school for talking too much, right? I've got in trouble. Progress reports very early on in my K-12 education career said he talks too much, right? I would get in trouble at school. I would get in trouble at home, but he talks too much. And so what was demonized in an education setting was not necessarily a negative thing. It was just an immature version. And so I grew up my whole life thinking that, communication was a negative thing, because if I don't do it in the right way, then, I get in trouble for that. And so much that I went to college, and my first degree program was computer engineering, right? I was going to school for computer engineering. Now, I switched my degree program when we did a job shadow, and I went and saw what computer engineers did. And I went into this office, and I saw a bunch of people with headphones on, like nobody was communicating, talking to each other, and I was like, "Oh snap!" Like there is no way, there is no way that this is something that I could do, right? And so me, I was on the completely wrong path as it relates to my designation from a degree standpoint in higher ed, because when I was going through K-12, nobody was able to identify that, hey, this is a strength, this is a benefit, right? And how can we cultivate that within our environment? And if we are able to now utilize these things in our instructional practices, you not only are able to engage your students, but you're also able to fulfill a need. I want you to think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like there is a need that a student has, and when that a need is not fulfilled, then there is something lacking. They are not able to get to the highest levels of self-actualization or success, because what? We have to make sure that these things are fulfilled, and they are fulfilled in a way to where now they can actually continue to progress and grow in everything that they're doing. And so in the same way, each one of these styles has a particular need. And so what we have to understand when it comes to these needs is that the behavior that they are showcasing us right now is communicating something. What exactly are your students communicating to you? Are you able to pick up based on the communication, based on the way in which they behave on a day-to-day basis? There is an underlying need as it relates to that, and I am able to adapt my instructional practices that aligns to that. Is this making sense? That is what I'm sharing with you all today. And so put out the slide for this, or the post for this. And one of the questions that was asked is like, was there a particular style that you have the most challenges as it relates to engaging? And as we continue to go through this, I want you to think about that. Like, is there one of the styles that we are going to talk about that is the most challenging for you in a classroom setting for you to engage? Now, I'm going to get directly to this because I don't want to, spend a lot of time as it relates to this. But there are so many elements that I'm not going to go into tonight that are really important, because based on the way that you're wired, based on your own behavioral preferences and tendencies, then there are certain students that you're more likely to clash with. There are certain students that you're more likely to write referrals on because they rub you the wrong way based on the way in which you have determined that things should be, the way in which you view the way a class should run, the structure of it, what you deem that will get not only you, but every single one of your students to success. If you're an administrator, what you deem is what is necessary in order for all of your students to be successful. That kind of perspective that you have and the way in which you've identified that this is the way it should be go actually lends to the students that you're more likely to refer, because they do not align with those strategies. I had this was a professor. It was actually when I worked at a university that I was in the training department, and the VP of our training department said this, and it was one of the most profound things that was ever stated. And I want to share this with all of you educators out there. It was this: if they're not engaged, then you're not engaging. Yes, I'm going to say that again. If your students are not engaged, then you are not engaging. Okay? When you shared this with us, I took it as a slap in the face, right? So you all are working with, students in higher ed. I was working with, individuals that are already in college, was working with adults as well. And so I was leading these training classes, and he said, if you're the individuals that are in your classes, if they're not engaged, then that's on you. And I'm like, these are grown adults, right? Like, they're responsible for them coming in, whether they put their head down, whether or not they want to be engaged or want to, pay attention to the information that is being shared. That is on them. What does that have to do with me and the way in which I instruct, the way in which I train? He replied again, if they're not engaged, then you are not engaging. And what he did is he empowered us. He basically challenged us to make sure that we are the individuals that says when they come into our learning environment, it is up to us, the individuals that are in the front of that class, is up to us to determine the engagement level of those individuals that come in. It is not up to the student. It's not up to the individual that is there within your classroom. It's not to those individuals that are sitting in those desks. It is up to you as the individual that leads that class that determines whether or not those individuals are engaged. And when we kind of like shift that ownership, we like take that accountability away from us, take that ownership away from us, and we give it to them, then we take away our power as well. We recognize that we are the individuals that set the stage. We are the individuals that set the tone as it relates to individuals being alert, individuals being focused, and individuals desiring the content that we are sharing, that it empowers us to what do I have to do in order for me to be better, in order for me to go to the next level, in order for me to understand the needs of my students and how I can keep them engaged. And that right there is what we're going to focus on. So with that being said, each one of these styles, each one of these behavioral styles has a way that we kind of view them. It has a kind of terminology and language that we kind of have adopted and kind of labeled them with. And so we have the D style that have classroom behaviors that we would call, the troublemaker. They, all the bossy ones, individuals that can be very much so disruptive when it comes to come to their class. And as it relates to the slide that I had on it before, we have to ask ourselves, what exactly is this student that has this behavioral style? What are they communicating? So I want you to think about this. Do you have a student, or have you ever had a student in your class that you know without a shadow of a doubt they fit into this qualification, right? I promise you, if we've ever had a classroom, especially if you were in education, you know those individuals, whether it's in elementary, whether, like you said, you're a secondary educator, like it's easy for you to be able to identify the students that fit into this column. Why? Because they're the individuals that jump off the page. They're the individuals that are assertive with their language. They're the individuals that are very direct. Like these things are so jump out on the page so much that it's hard for us not to identify and recognize them for who they are. But what exactly is that behavior? What is it communicating? There is an instructional need, right? There's an instructional need. We have to provide those individuals with leadership opportunities. Wait a minute, because this is my classroom, right? This is my classroom. This is my stage. I understand that. But if we can understand what the need is of that student, then we can utilize that need to our advantage. I mentioned earlier, cultivating these leadership skills, helping them go from the immature state of whatever that characteristic is right now to helping them elevate to a more mature version of that. They cannot elevate to a more mature version without somebody embracing and engaging and helping them to be better with that. And so instead of leaning into the power struggle, the dynamics that could happen when, engaging with a student like this, how about we lean into it? Give them something to lead, right? Challenge them with critical thinking questions. This is a type of way to where we can actually take somebody that could derail the whole aspect of our classroom, and we can, at the very beginning, very much so get them on our side. This is what classroom engagement is all about. How many of the individuals that are in my class are actually on the same page with me, are actually in alignment with me? They're on team me as the educator versus team classmate, like jockeying with each other, focused on what's going on beside them. No, if we can have them locked in with us, it makes them less likely to be locked in on anything else that is going on in the classroom. How do we do that? Lean in, right? So this is the instructional need. We have to provide them with opportunities to lead, challenge them with critical thinking, and offer clear, concise goals. They're very much so long introductions, taking a lot of time to get your point across. You've already lost these individuals. And so is it that student's fault if the approach that we took too long and their attention span just cut off? Remember what I said earlier, if they're not engaged, then you're not engaging. What do I mean by that? Maybe you didn't know that this was the instructional need that they had, but now that you do know, what can you now adapt? What can you now do that aligns with being able to fulfill that need. And we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit. What about our communicators? Now, what are the classroom behaviors that they have? These are class clowns. Now, I will admit, I I fit into this category. I fit into both of the categories actually that we just talked about. But a class clown is very much so, chatterbox, someone that spoke a lot and very much so a lot of times they were out of turn. But what was I communicating? Incorporate plenty of group work. A lot of times the way that our classes are structured is in a way that where, like I said, it appeals to one style of instruction or it appeals to one style of students. And so those individuals that are engaged or learn differently, those individuals just have to adapt and get on the page of the educator, get on the page of the instructor in the room, or get in trouble. And a lot of times we have a lot of referrals that are a byproduct of our inability to adapt to the instructional needs of our students. I'm not going to say you. Let me use some different language. We, inclusive, right? We as educators, if we could be more aware of the different styles that are in our class, your behavioral referrals would decrease drastically with this one thing: understanding their behaviors and understanding what that need is. And so instead of having the old boring way of passing out a worksheet, right? Engaging in group discussions, allowing them to do presentations. Have you ever had a student to where they took a standardized test and they missed a question on that test? After that, you asked them, hey, what is this? And they gave you the answer to that. You're like, well, why didn't you just write that down? Hello, that individual performs way better. They're already a communicator. See how these things align? That individual performs better when they are allowed to operate in their gift and operate within their strength. That person, giving them an oral exam, giving them something they can communicate to you, like if you ask them every single one of those questions, which I know can be challenging in a way, because it kind of deviates from all the other styles that are in the room as well. But being able to differentiate our instruction can really appeal to them. And so if we have individuals that are interactive, how about we play to those interactive styles and lean into it so we can incorporate that into our practices? Is everybody understanding what I'm sharing? Are y'all picking up what I'm putting down? Let me know, because I want to make sure that I'm on the same page. I want to make sure that we are all here. Are y'all with me? All right. So let's move on. What about our helpers? These individuals can be seen a lot of times as people pleasers. They can be seen as individuals that are passive at times, and depending on the style of the educator, this could be a good thing, or this could be something that can be more challenging for you to engage with. Like I said, I want to understand. I want you all to interact with me to let me know which one of the styles are the most challenging as it relates to you and when it comes to engaging. So this person may be a little bit more quiet. They aren't necessarily the ones that are going to be, you ask a question, they may not be the quickest one to answer that. So if you ask the question to somebody, you open up the class with that, and they're not necessarily the first ones to answer, does that bother you at all? Does that kind of impact, is it challenging for you to get that individual, get that person engaged in what it is that you want them to engage with? And so what do we have to do? We have to create a safe, predictable, right, environment. This sounds completely different than what we just talked about with our leaders and our communicators. These individuals thrive on routines. You want to have one of your helper students to be frustrated to the high heavens? Change up something they were expecting to happen. If you want to see them lose everything, I'm talking about the complete, I didn't even know they had this behavior. The very much so the quiet one, very much so passive, seems to be very much so verbal and aggressive time. They thrive on things that other students may not necessarily thrive on. And so they encouraging them to participate without putting them on the spot, right? That's a great opportunity for you to realize how you can differentiate how to engage them in the things. Like you could do something very simple, much so of like instead of calling like with an I student, getting them to verbalize or respond in a way, like having them involved with like passing out the paper, right? Like it's these different types of things that very much so can create that environment that we're talking about that makes it safe for someone that operates in this way. All right, let's move ahead. We got our investigators. We know these, they can be classified at times as students that are maybe overthinkers, question a lot of things, ask a lot of questions. Why this, why that? And you're like, why do you keep asking me all these questions, right? And so they have very much so can be like nitpickers at times too, because they are individuals that are analytical and very detail oriented, and very much so even reserved in the way in which they go about doing things. And so like their instructional need is what they need tasks that involve critical thinking, right? So this is not what we talked about with our helpers, but for them, critical thinking is a must because that is what they thrive on. That is how their brain is wired. The problem solving aspect of things is something that is engaging to them in the same way with another student that may not necessarily be engaging to them. Why? Because they're already analytical. So we lean in. You see this terminology that I continue to use. We lean in to what that student naturally is wired, how that student is naturally wired in order to incorporate it into what we do in the classroom. And so with that being said, we've talked about the 4 styles as students. And so what exactly can we do as educators? What exactly can we do as instructors to make sure that we're engaging and reaching every single one of our students at the same time? And we're going to talk about disengagement. And what disengagement is all about is making sure that we are able to engage all the different types of the students by addressing their unique learning styles and their preferences. And when we lean into what their learning styles are, well, when we know what their learning styles are, and when we are able to lean into incorporating that into our lesson plans, we literally change the dynamics of our classroom. When we understand that the needs of each one of those is that for our Ds, our leaders, for them, it's as leaders, they love challenges, right? So, and they want to be in control instead of jockeying and fighting for control and saying that I'm the one that leads this class and not you. That is not a lean-in method. With our I students, those individuals that are very much so communicators and influential in the way in which they do things, these students love the social elements of it. They love to communicate and talk. And then instead of us telling them like to shut up or telling them to be quiet in class, what if we lean into that? What about the students that are very much so calm and patient and like the routines, instead of us like changing up the routine every single day, providing that structure for them? And our conscientious, our individuals that are investigators, and we understand that these students are thinkers, very much so critical thinkers. If we can lean into those detail-oriented nature of our assignments and cater them to them, then we are literally able to cater to all the styles. Now, Daniel, how the heck do we do that? I'm getting ready to share that with you. If you all have a class, if you're an educator and you have a class that you are leading tomorrow, I'm getting ready to give you something that you can share at the very beginning of your class that literally engages every single one of the styles as soon as you start your lesson. And if you want that, if y'all with me, if y'all on the same page, if this is something that you all are interested in, let me know. Right? So how can I very much so engage my students? Like what can I do within my lesson plan that makes this disengagement possible? There's literally 4 steps to the framework that we utilize, and the one that I'm going to focus on tonight, just for brevity's sake, to make sure that like this doesn't go on for a very long time, is going to be the introduction. And we call this the hook. What exactly is the hook, Daniel? Great question you asked. This is how we open up our lesson. This is when we step to the front of the class and we're getting ready to start. How do we engage every single one of these individuals differently? Start off, we have to know who our students are. And so this means you can actually, number one, if you want to work with me, actually I've worked with many school districts to send the assessment so they can actually know what the styles of the students are in their classroom. And so that's one aspect of it. Or you can take what we've shared tonight and actually kind of like take a list. I think this student falls into this category or this one falls into that. And tomorrow when you step in front of that class, those that you know that are those leaders that are in the classroom, ask them a challenging question as it relates to the subject that you're talking about. All right, elementary, we're working on letters. We're working on letters today. And now last week, we were working on this letter. Hey, what do you think, Daniel? What do you think we're working on today? And they're going to start firing off. Now, S's, this will not work for them, right? But that D, they're going to what? They're going to be firing off what they think the letter that we're going to be working on today. Lean in to that leadership. And this is not relinquishing control. This is leaning in to actually learn how you can get them on your side. So, because if they're on your side, then they're less likely to be engaged with the individuals that are around them. Does that make sense? What about our communicators? Ask them a challenging question as it relates to the subject matter, right? Or give them something to solve, right? Like, hey, riddle me this. If this, like, give them something to communicate about. We do not want them communicating in the immature way or when it's not necessarily needed. So how about we allow them the space to be able to communicate? I remember going to this one school and I was sharing with them, like, all the students in your class lounge, like, if you just gave them a moment in time before class started to get jokes off and everything, like you bought them a book of jokes and allowed them to have that space, they no longer have that need that needs to be fulfilled during your classroom. You fulfill that for them, right? So there's many ways that you could go about doing this. I'm just focusing on instruction as it relates to right now. What about our helpers? Explain how today's lesson fits into the routine of what we've already been talking about. Link it together. Hey, as we were talking about the letters, we're going to finish up the rest of the alphabet by the end of the year. And in order for us to do that, we have to make sure that we capitalize on this section. If we're in secondary education, obviously that example applies to those that are elementary educators, but use your imagination, right? We are able to now link that lesson into something that we've already been doing, and they can see the relevance of it, and now they're more likely to be engaged in what it is that we're doing. And last but not least, our investigators, give them a clear, very much so clear goal for the lesson. This is the why behind the what. Now, do the eyes need to know, the communicators need to know the why behind the what? No, they don't care about the why behind the what. So if we like really overemphasizing the whys, we only have a group of individuals that really matters to. If we're a really structured environment, then we only have a group of our students that are really engaged by that. Or if we're very much so a super engaging, you like to have fun. I'm talking about your classrooms are the most engaging classrooms ever. There's only a group of your students that are leaning into that and are engaged by that. And if you have like a super competitive classroom, I'm talking about you're competitive through the roof and you want every one of your students to compete for these, you only have a group of your students that are engaged by that. But if we are able to start our lesson by engaging every single one of these styles, we literally have hooked everyone in at the very beginning of our lesson, and now we do not have to fight to capture their attention later on. Listen, if we get their attention at the very beginning, we do not have to fight for it during the rest of our class. This is called the hook, and this is a portion of what we're talking about as it relates to disengagement. And so I wanted to share this with you all because utilizing this is a game changer to your instructional practices. When we know not only the behavioral styles, but also the instructional need that is connected to that behavioral style, we now are able to identify how we can bring our lessons to life, how we can make sure that our students are truly understanding, not just attaining the information, but retention. How can we ensure that there's retention? We cannot ensure that there's retention if we're not sure that we've actually gotten the information to them. How do we do that? We have to get them engaged in a way that is engaging to them. If we get students engaged in the things that are engaging to them, that is how we increase classroom engagement. That is how we increase student engagement. When they're engaged in the things that are engaging to them, there is no engagement issues. That's why a student can be bored in one class or asleep in one class, but fully alive in another one. That instructor, that educator has leaned into the particular thing that is engaging to them. It's why a student that very much so ADHD, they can't pay attention, go home and fully engaged in basketball or games, can't can't get their attention off of it. They're engaged in something that is engaging to them, so therefore they have engagement. That is how we increase the engagement within our classrooms. And so I wanted to share this with you all because it's been a game changer, not only for me and the work that I do, but as I've shared it with other educators, it's been a game changer for them as well. And I wanted every educator that I know to understand how they could apply this concept into their day to day. And so, if you all have any questions, feel free to ask your questions. Feel free to write your comments underneath this. I promise you all, I will engage because I want to make sure that you all clearly understand every aspect of what I was sharing. And if you are somebody as an educator or administrator that says, hey, I want to know the different types of students that I have in my class. I think I know, but I would like to know for sure. And you want to want them to take the assessment, reach out to me. I can make sure that not only you, but also your students have the assessment. If you're an administrator, you want your staff to have this. Like, I can show you not only how you can identify what your styles are, in the classroom as well, and how you now can actually mesh those things and lean into those within your instructional practices. And so I just want to thank you all for joining me. I love doing this, and I love being able to help as many educators as I can take their engagement, take their the culture, classroom culture, to the next level. And I hope you all incorporate this into yours. And so this is another edition of the Disc Advantage and how you can advance the things that you are doing within your school and within your district by utilizing these principles. My name is Dr. Daniel Truelove. Until next time, have a good night.